What happens when the church, meant to be a place of love, grace, and healing, becomes the stage for public humiliation? A Texas pastor shocked his congregation when he openly rebuked a singer in front of everyone, leaving the artist embarrassed and the audience stunned. But just when it seemed like the controversy couldn't get any messier, gospel legend Marvin Sapp himself stepped in. And what he said has the entire faith community buzzing. You won't believe how this story unfolds, and the hidden truths behind this scandal may change the way you look at church leadership forever. Church drama has always been a sensitive subject, but this story takes things to another level. Recently, a shocking moment unfolded in a Texas church when a pastor humiliated a singer during service, calling them out in front of the entire congregation. The clip spread across social media like wildfire, sparking heated debates about respect, leadership, and the role of humility in ministry. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Gospel legend Marvin Sapp, known for hits like Never Would Have Made It, and his decades of influence in the gospel music world, decided he couldn't stay silent. He stepped in, weighed in publicly, and his words have left churchgoers, singers, and pastors everywhere divided. In this video, we're going to break down exactly what happened inside that Texas church, why Marvin Sapp felt the need to intervene, and how this single moment of public rebuke has sparked larger conversations about church culture, pride, and leadership accountability. We'll walk you through the timeline of events, reactions from church members and online voices, and Marvin Sapp's powerful response. And along the way, we'll reveal some surprising truths that many in the church don't want you to know. So stick with us until the end, because this isn't just a story about one pastor and one singer. It's about the state of the modern church, how leaders wield their authority, and the fine line between discipline and humiliation. And trust me, what we uncover will make you question, was this really about correcting a mistake, or was it about ego and power? To fully understand the outrage surrounding this story, we need to start at the very beginning, the Sunday service where everything went down. It was supposed to be a typical worship experience. The sanctuary was full, the praise team was on stage, and like so many churches across America, the congregation was ready for a morning of song, prayer, and the preached word. But instead of unity and inspiration, what unfolded that day left people in shock, embarrassment, and disbelief. A young singer had been invited to minister in song during the service. By all accounts, this individual had talent and passion, eager to share their gift with the church family. They began singing, pouring their heart into the performance, connecting with the crowd, and giving what should have been a moment of inspiration. But suddenly, the pastor interrupted. According to witnesses and the viral video circulating online, the pastor stopped the music mid-performance. He turned his attention directly to the singer and delivered what many described as a public rebuke. Instead of gently correcting or pulling the individual aside in private, the pastor scolded them openly, pointing out what he claimed were mistakes, missteps, or even spiritual shortcomings. The congregation fell silent. Some gasped, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few even walked out. What was supposed to be an uplifting worship service had turned into a public spectacle. Social media footage shows the singer standing there visibly shaken, eyes down, body tense, unsure of how to respond, while the pastor's words echoed through the microphone. Members of the praise team looked stunned, and whispers spread quickly across the pews. For many who watched the clip online, the issue wasn't whether the singer had made a mistake, it was how the pastor handled it. Public humiliation, they argued, has no place in the house of God. A leader's role, after all, is to guide, encourage, and correct in love, not tear down in front of hundreds of people. Within hours, clips of the incident had been uploaded to TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. The captions were brutal. Church petty. This is why people leave the church. And embarrassment isn't discipline. Thousands of comments flooded in, with many condemning the pastor's actions. Some defended him, saying leaders must uphold standards in worship, but the overwhelming tone was outrage, anger that a person's gift and dignity were treated so harshly in public. And this is where things began to escalate, because it wasn't just church members and social media users who had something to say. Prominent voices in the gospel community started to weigh in, asking tough questions about leadership, accountability, and whether pastors are crossing boundaries when they handle issues this way. But one voice, in particular, rose above the noise, and it was a voice that no one could ignore. Gospel legend Marvin Sapp saw what happened, and he had something powerful to say. When the clip of the Texas pastor publicly rebuking the singer first went viral, it was already causing a storm online. But what truly turned the moment into a national conversation within the faith community was the reaction from one of gospel music's biggest legends, Marvin Sapp. Marvin Sapp is not just a household name in gospel, he is a cultural icon. His song Never Would Have Made It became an anthem of hope across churches, radio stations, and even mainstream media. He's a pastor, a recording artist, and a respected leader whose influence reaches far beyond music. So when someone of his stature speaks, the church world listens. Sapp did not hold back. In his response, which circulated across Facebook and Instagram, he addressed not only the Texas incident, but the larger culture of humiliation in churches. His words were clear, direct, and convicting. He stressed that while correction is sometimes necessary, public rebuke should never be the first resort. According to Sapp, the role of a pastor is to build people up, even when offering critique, rather than to tear them down in front of others. He wrote in part that leaders have a biblical responsibility to restore in love rather than humiliate. He emphasized that correction should be private when possible, because public shaming doesn't bring growth, it brings trauma. His comments resonated deeply with those who have experienced similar treatment in their own churches, reigniting painful memories for many who felt silenced or embarrassed in the name of discipline. But what really set Sapp's response apart was how personal it felt. He drew from his own decades of experience leading congregations and mentoring young singers and musicians. He explained that as a leader, he has seen countless moments when someone struggled or fell short on stage. But in those moments, his job wasn't to embarrass them, it was to guide them. That's how, he argued, true leaders operate. Almost immediately, Marvin Sapp's words went viral. Screenshots of his response spread across social media with captions like, "Thank you, Marvin, for saying what needed to be said," and "This is why he's respected as both an artist and a pastor." Gospel singers, choir directors, and even ordinary church members flooded his posts with agreement. For many, his voice gave legitimacy to the outrage they already felt. But not everyone agreed. Some pastors and leaders pushed back, arguing that Marvin Sapp was undermining the authority of the pulpit by challenging another pastor so openly. They insisted that sometimes public correction is necessary to maintain order in the church, especially when worship standards are being compromised. This sparked a new wave of debate. Was Marvin Sapp defending the dignity of artists, or was he stepping out of line by calling out another leader? The tension highlighted a deeper issue in church culture, the clash between traditional authority and modern accountability. For generations, pastors have been treated as unquestionable voices in their churches, but in today's era of social media and transparency, that dynamic is being challenged. Marvin Sapp's response placed him right in the center of that battle. And while his words brought comfort to many, they also raised an even bigger question. If gospel legends are now stepping in to call out petty church behavior, what does that say about the state of the modern church? But before we dive into that bigger question, let's pause to explore how the public responded. Not just fans online, but other gospel artists, church leaders, and even people who typically avoid church drama. because their voices amplified this story in ways that made it impossible for ABC, YouTube, or church leadership circles to ignore. If Marvin Sapp's response lit a fire, the public's reaction turned it into a full-blown blaze. The incident and his comments became the topic of heated debates not only in church circles, but across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. And what made the reaction so powerful was the sheer range of voices weighing in. On one side, there was outrage. Thousands of church members, gospel fans, and even people who admitted they hadn't been to church in years expressed anger and disappointment over the way the Texas pastor handled the situation. For many, the viral clip wasn't just about one singer. It reminded them of personal wounds. Comments flooded in like, "This happened to me as a teenager in church. I never sang again. This is why young people are walking away. They come for love and leave with trauma. Correct in private, celebrate in public." That's leadership. TikTok creators began stitching the video, sharing their own stories of being embarrassed by leaders in front of a congregation. Some videos had hundreds of thousands of views as people opened up about the lasting damage caused by public shaming. What started as one local church scandal quickly became a reflection of something much bigger, a culture of pride and power dynamics in many churches. But not everyone was outraged. A smaller but vocal group of commenters defended the Texas pastor's decision. They argued that maintaining the spirit of excellence in worship sometimes requires real-time correction. In their view, the singer's mistake, whether it was missing a note, straying from the assigned song, or showing lack of preparation, warranted a public response because the service wasn't about performance, but about honoring God. One pastor wrote online, "Sometimes correction stings, but it's necessary. If you can't handle it, maybe the pulpit isn't for you." This division revealed just how deeply split church culture is when it comes to leadership styles. Some cling to traditional authoritative models where pastors are unquestioned spiritual fathers. Others advocate for a new, compassionate leadership style that prioritizes emotional well-being over public discipline. Gospel artists and choir directors also added their voices. Some supported Marvin Sapp, saying they had seen too many young talents quit music entirely because of humiliating experiences in church. Others quietly sided with the pastor, noting that gospel music has always had high standards and that accountability, even if public, comes with the territory. Interestingly, this controversy also reached people outside of church culture. Secular commentators on platforms like YouTube and Twitter began dissecting the incident as an example of toxic leadership and abuse of power. For them, it wasn't about theology, it was about human dignity, and that made the story resonate even more broadly. The hashtags told the story of how far it spread. Hashtag #ChurchPetty trended among young users mocking the pastor's behavior. #, Stand with Singers was used by musicians, supporting the idea that artists should be treated with respect. Marvin Sapp was trending as fans rallied behind his statement, praising his courage to address an issue that many had been too afraid to discuss. Church members from across the country even began tagging their own leaders, calling for accountability and asking hard questions about whether public rebuke has a place in worship. Suddenly, this wasn't just a Texas issue. It was a national one, sparking conversations in Sunday schools, Bible studies, and choir rehearsals everywhere. But perhaps the most surprising reaction came from within Marvin Sapp's own circle. Some of his pastoral peers reportedly cautioned him privately that by stepping into the controversy, he had opened himself up to criticism. Yet, the overwhelming support from fans and artists suggested otherwise. People were ready for someone of his influence to call out what they saw as church culture gone wrong. Still, beneath all the debates, one question kept resurfacing. Why are so many leaders choosing public humiliation over private guidance? And that's the question that leads us into the deeper issue. What this incident really reveals about the state of modern church leadership. While the Texas church incident initially grabbed attention for its shock value, the conversation it sparked goes far beyond a single rebuke. At its core, this controversy has exposed long-standing tensions within modern church leadership and the evolving expectations of congregations. Churches have traditionally operated under hierarchical structures, where pastors are viewed as spiritual authorities whose word is rarely questioned. In these models, public correction was often considered a legitimate tool to maintain order, enforce standards, and uphold the sanctity of worship. For decades, congregations accepted this dynamic without question. However, times are changing. Today's churchgoers expect accountability, transparency, and empathy from their leaders. The rise of social media has amplified voices that previously went unheard, allowing congregants, musicians, and ministry staff to share experiences widely. Humiliation, even in the name of discipline, is increasingly scrutinized. And when a public rebuke like the one in Texas goes viral, it becomes a reflection of broader leadership issues rather than an isolated incident. Experts and theologians note that there is a fine line between discipline and abuse. Discipline, when done in love and privacy, can guide, correct, and build. Humiliation, on the other hand, erodes trust, creates fear, and can even drive talented individuals away from ministry entirely. The Texas incident, in this context, highlights the dangers of leadership that prioritizes ego over stewardship. Marvin Sapp's involvement underscores another critical point. Influential voices have the power to shape church culture. By publicly addressing the incident, Sapp not only defended the singer, but also sent a message to church leaders everywhere. Leadership is measured not by the ability to command fear, but by the ability to nurture growth and uphold dignity. The debate also reveals generational differences within the church. Younger members, particularly millennials and Gen Z congregants, are far less tolerant of public humiliation. They value inclusivity, respect, and emotional intelligence. Older congregants may still adhere to traditional authority models, believing that strict correction preserves order and sanctity. This clash of expectations is fueling broader discussions about how churches can balance reverence, accountability, and compassion. Another layer of the controversy involves the role of gospel music within church culture. Singers and musicians are not just performers, they are ministers. Their work conveys messages of faith, hope, and worship. Publicly shaming a singer can undermine not only their confidence, but also the spiritual experience of the congregation. This incident raises essential questions. How do leaders support ministry staff while maintaining standards? How can they correct without diminishing the gifts God has given? And how can church authority evolve to meet the expectations of modern congregations without losing its foundational principles? Social media has accelerated this conversation. Videos, clips, and commentary have reached millions, prompting dialogues in spaces that were previously private. Bible study groups, choir rehearsals, and pastoral training programs. The viral nature of this incident ensures that the lessons it offers will be studied and debated for months, if not years. And here's the shocking part many might not realize. Incidents like this are more common than most congregants think. Stories of public rebuke and humiliation surface periodically, but they rarely gain the visibility that this one did until someone like Marvin Sapp amplifies the conversation. His intervention has forced churches nationwide to ask uncomfortable questions about leadership style, accountability, and the delicate balance between correction and compassion. This is where it gets even more interesting. As debates rage, many church leaders are reportedly reevaluating their policies for handling mistakes, especially in public ministry. Some are implementing new mentorship programs, private feedback channels, and pastoral training to prevent incidents like the Texas rebuke. The ripple effects of this single moment are shaping the future of church leadership and ministry culture in ways that no one could have predicted.